Welcome to this Sara Alert tutorial, where you will learn how to populate the isolation monitoring workflow with cases and how to move these cases between different line lists. These actions can be completed by users signed in with the Public Health or Public Health Enroller role. The isolation monitoring dashboard can be populated with case records either one at a time or multiple records at a time. The first method is moving a single monitoree from the exposure monitoring dashboard. To move a record from the exposure monitoring workflow, update the case status field to either confirmed or probable. In the resulting prompt, select the Continue Monitoring and Isolation Workflow option. The monitoree will now be displayed in the relevant line list in the isolation monitoring workflow. The second method is importing cases directly into the isolation monitoring workflow through the available formats in the Import drop-down list. Sara Alert will signal that a monitoree preliminarily meets a recovery definition by moving their record to the Records Requiring Review line list. Cases on this line list require review by Public Health to validate that it is safe to discontinue isolation. The recovery definitions for COVID-19 are based on CDC guidance and may change over time. The recovery definition logic has been designed to be sensitive. As a result, cases that do not meet requirements for recovery may appear. As of June 2020, the system automatically moves records to the Records Requiring Review line list when any of the following conditions are met. The first recovery definition is test-based, which requires that there have been 2 documented negative lab test results and it has been more than 24 hours since fever was reported without the use of fever-reducing medication. This means that it must be at least 24 hours since a documented yes to fever and the use of a fever-reducing medicine in the reports section. This logic relies on data supplied by the monitorees and requires input from a public health user. For a case to meet this definition, lab test results must be available to the system. To document a new test result, in the Lab Results section, click the button to add a new lab result and fill out the fields in the pop-up. Here is an example of a record on the reporting line list that includes 1 negative test result in the Lab Results section, and where it has been more than 24 hours since fever and fever-reducing medication was reported. With only 1 negative test result, it does not yet meet the test-based recovery definition. However, by clicking Add a New Result and submitting a second negative test result, the record will meet the recovery definition and be moved to the Records Requiring Review line list, showing that the test-based criteria has been met. The system does not currently use the specimen collection date or type data elements in the test-based recovery logic. This is to allow for expert review of cases based on latest guidance, which may change between software releases. A public health user will need to validate the lab results documented meet specific criteria for recovery. For example, 24 hours apart, consecutive results, and approved test method, before releasing a case on the Records Requiring Review line list from isolation. The second recovery definition is symptomatic non-test based, which requires that it has been more than 10 days since the onset of symptoms, and it has been more than 72 hours since the case last reported a fever without the use of fever-reducing medication. This means that it must be at least 72 hours since a documented yes to fever and the use of fever-reducing medication in the reports section. This logic relies on data supplied by the monitorees. The date of symptom onset is displayed in the Records Reports section. It is important to validate this information. To meet this recovery definition, a monitoree is required to have at least 1 report that is at least 72 hours old. The system does not collect information on self-reported symptom severity, a component of the CDC recovery definition. Upon review, if a case's fever has resolved, but respiratory symptoms have not improved, a user can add a note to the report to document this. The record will remain on the Records Requiring Review line list, and the case should be followed up with according to the local protocol to determine when it is safe to discontinue isolation. For example, this monitoree no longer has a fever, but continues to report severe respiratory symptoms. A public health user has determined that it is not yet safe to release this case from isolation. To document this information, add a note using the Actions button to capture the severity of those symptoms in the record history. This case will remain on the Records Requiring Review line list. The next time the monitoree is contacted by public health, the user can see that at the last check, their symptoms had not improved and need to be reevaluated. As another example, if during your interview with a case that is on the Records Requiring Review line list, they mention that they took a pain reliever within the last 72 hours but forgot to report it, you can modify that symptom report. Since this recovery logic looks to see if fever or fever-reducing medication has been used in the past 72 hours after the report is updated, the case will move back to the reporting line list since they no longer meet the recovery definition. The third recovery definition is asymptomatic non-test based, which requires that it has been more than 10 days since a positive laboratory test result, no symptoms have ever been reported to the system, and there is at least one report in the system documenting no symptoms. This logic relies on data supplied by the monitorees and requires input from a public health user. For example, here is a case in the reporting line list that does not yet meet the asymptomatic non-test-based recovery definition. To document a new test result, in the Lab Results section, click the button to add a new lab result and fill out the fields in the pop-up. Since we are adding a positive lab result that was reported over 10 days ago, this record now preliminarily meets this recovery definition. Once the report is documented, the system will refresh and the record will be moved to the Records Requiring Review line list, showing that the asymptomatic non-test-based criteria has been met. A public health user will need to validate that the lab results documented meet specific criteria for recovery, example given, approved test method and timing of results, before releasing a case on the Records Requiring Review line list from isolation. The current recovery definitions used by the system can be found in the user guide or the Requires Review info buttons. The info button will display the specific recovery definition criteria that has been met by a record, like the test-based recovery logic. The system displays which recovery definition was preliminarily met to allow public health users to focus review on the information from the record that resulted in the monitoree appearing on the Record Requiring Review line list. In the following sections, we will review how to move a case off the Records Requiring Review line list, either because the case should continue to be monitored or because it is safe for the monitoree to discontinue isolation. Please note when reviewing records in the isolation workflow that the red row shading and Needs Review column have no bearing on a record meeting a recovery definition. This information is used in the exposure workflow to indicate that a report meets the symptomatic logic. The Isolation Reports user interface will be refined in a future release. If public health has confirmed that it is not yet safe for a case to discontinue isolation, simply update the relevant report fields with the information that disqualifies the record from meeting the recovery logic by clicking the icon under Actions and selecting Edit. For example, if an individual forgot to report use of a fever-reducing medication, update the report to reflect that. The system will refresh and move the record to the appropriate reporting or non-reporting line list to continue daily monitoring until specific recovery criteria has been met again. A user can add a note to the report to specifically document why the case has returned to monitoring. If a case will no longer be monitored by public health, for instance, if they have recovered, The record can be closed so that it will no longer appear on the active monitoring line lists, and the system will stop sending daily symptom report request messages to the case. To move a record to the closed line list, first open the Record of Interest. Next, update monitoring status to Not Monitoring. Document the reason for the monitoring status changes and any additional details you wish to capture. The change is documented in the record's history. If public health has determined that a case has recovered, meets criteria to discontinue isolation should be selected as the reason. A record can be moved back to the active monitoring line lists by changing the monitoring status back to actively monitoring. Thank you for watching this Sara Alert training video. You can find additional training and resources on saraalert.org.